the moment we've all been waiting for. Please, put your hands together for Tofurky, Seth Tofurky Tibbott.
Ooh, no pressure, right? Thank you. It's a great honor to be here in the vegan-friendly city of Greater Philadelphia. And I'm so impressed. I was here 2 years ago with Vance, and he took me all around. And this is a hidden gem. People don't realize what power there is in this neighborhood. And it's great to be here. Thanks for the point of view article, our little poem there. You know, it reminded me of a story of there was a farmer that went out in his barnyard with his son, and he came to the turkey pen and he picked up a turkey and he gave it to the son, and he gave him a hatchet, and he said, "Go out there behind the barn where nobody can see you and kill this turkey." And so the son went back behind the barn with the hatchet and the turkey, and he came back with the hatchet and one very alive turkey. And the farmer said, "I thought I told you to go back beside the barn where nobody could see you and kill the turkey." And the son said, "You know, wherever I went, the turkey could see me." Okay, thank you. And that's sort of the essence of point of view. You know, just because they can't talk doesn't mean they don't have a point of view on living, and instead of being somebody's dinner. Anyways, it's great to be here, you know, in the summer day. Happy summer, everybody. Like, this is summer. You know, I left Friday morning from very cold house in the Cascade Mountains. It's cold and still rainy out there, you know, but we love summer. Don't get me wrong, it's our favorite day of the year in the Northwest. And we know it's going to come soon, just like the day when the world recognized veganism is coming and is here. It's going to happen all of a sudden. But, you know, people look at Tofurky and they think that, oh, it's a OG brand and, you know, trailblazer, and it has been. But, you know, you come out here and you listen to Vance's talk and you see Freya and you listen to her. And I mean, you look at especially Freya and Jay, 1960, I mean, in 1980 was hard enough finding vegan food in the grocery store, but they were out here in 1960 doing this. So, and Freya and Jay, let's just really honor them, like give them a round of applause for everything they've done and continue to do. So this talk's going to be two different parts. The first part is going to be about the Tofurky story, which is going to give you a little insight onto how Tofurky came about. And it's also how a little bit of transparency into, like, what's it like in a business when you're starting a business and trying to run this. So if you know somebody that's starting a business, good book for them would be the book of looking for The Search of the Wild Tofurky. And I also have some gifts here that I brought from the Tofurky factory to give to some of you smart people. But yeah, here's the book of The Search of the Wild Tofurky, and I'll be reading some of that. You know, as they said, I was not a business person, to say the least, when I started what was to become the Tofurky company. I was a wandering naturalist, and I would work in the Oregon public schools for 3 months in the fall and 3 months in the spring. And the rest of the time, I'd travel around and hitchhike, and I was looking for this ivory-billed woodpecker in the summers and winters. And it was a nice kind of gig, really, only working part-time. But in 1980, I took a job in Alaska thanks to Jimmy Carter, one of the best presidents we ever had. And he had these jobs working as a naturalist in the forests of Alaska, so I saved up $2,500. I came down and I looked at the landscape, and how did we have the most unfriendly environmental president but Ronald Reagan, who just said, we don't need all these outdoor school things. So my job was kind of gone, and so I started to think about tempeh, and I had found tempeh in Tennessee in the 1970s when I was traveling back and forth between naturalist gigs, and there was this farm in Tennessee. Who's heard of the farm? There we go. Yeah, it was like this commune. It was a spiritual commune with 1,200 hippies on 1,600 acres, and they were trying to be self-sufficient because they thought like being independent was the true spiritual way to live a life, and they wanted to live low on the food chain, so they were what was called pure vegetarians. Today we'd call that vegan, but back then the word vegan, even though it was invented in 1944, it wasn't in the lexicon, and you were either if you were a vegetarian, you were a lacto vegetarian or you were a pure vegetarian. Well, these guys, these 1,200 people were pure vegetarians, and they were eating tempeh and tofu. And tempeh, they said, oh my God, when we make tempeh, it just disappears. And all of the kids and the big working people that are doing all this hard labor growing soybeans and stuff, they just love it, and it goes crazy. So I thought, these hippies, they might have something here. I think tempeh might be the next granola. And I had that vision of granola because when I was in college in Ohio in 1974, I got a job at the head shop, which is a paraphernalia shop for buying your papers for the next great party or political protest against the war. And down underneath the papers was this little shelf where you could get rainbow-colored bags of granola. And that was the only place in town where you could get it. And these people would come in and they'd go, give me a pipe and give me some papers, and I'll have some granola too. I'm going to be hungry later. So it was like that kind of thing. So I thought tempeh, they were right about granola, because I went through there 5 years later, and the supermarket shelves were full of granola. And I said, oh, they were right about granola. They're going to be right about tempeh too. And so I came back to Oregon and I started business, knowing that I didn't have any naturalist business anymore. So I said, maybe these guys are good about business, and they want business. So I went to my local co-op, and they had a kitchen that I rented for $25 a month, and I was pretty darn excited to be in business, because business was not really where you went for change back then. It wasn't an agent change. It was like the status quo was business. You had the Generals, the General Foods, the General Motors, you had DuPont, and you didn't go into business to change the world. But here I was, and I was trying to survive, but I was also, I had read about the Diet for a Small Planet book. People have read that. That was Frances Moore LePay, and she was like, it makes no sense feeding grain to animals, who are a very inefficient way of producing protein. It'd be better feeding it directly to people. And I thought that makes a lot of sense as a naturalist, because in Ohio, if we had a more efficient way of growing food, all of these farmlands could be returned to forest, and the wild animals and birds that I loved would be better off. So it was really an environmental thing, but I was very naive about business. And I went and I put $50 down, and I sent it to the state of Oregon for my business license. And a week later, I decided to go out with my family, including my brother Bob, Bob is here, by the way. This is the guy that, there'd be no Tofurky without Bob. He was my backer and financially and spiritual advisor and everything. He's just been an amazing brother. But we had, our mom was the kind of person, like, she was like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. You remember that? And so I went out after I sealed the envelope, I put it in the post office, and I went to visit my Aunt Rosie. And Aunt Rosie was a fiery redhead who was not shy about speaking her mind. And this is a little story that I wrote in the book about visiting my Aunt Rosie in 1980, right after I went into business. A week later, after the business was just getting off the ground that December, I decided to take a couple weeks off for a holiday trip to spend some time with family in Minnesota. I was excited to tell them about my new career and how all the pieces were coming together with my space at the co-op and the growing natural foods market. My Aunt Rosie listened dutifully to her young nephew for almost an hour on one of those evenings. Then she fixed her eye on me until I had no other option but to stop talking. Seth, she said, selling soybean food to the American public is a very bad idea. I wanted to have something to say about that. I wanted to be able to offer her a thoughtful, business-like counter-argument. I wanted to explain how it was a good idea, but without relying on the evidence of 1,200 hippies, granola, and clues from the benevolent universe. You know, you might be right, I told her. Of course I'm right. I got up to get us both another piece of amazing apple pie. No one wants to eat soybeans, she said, and especially not moldy ones. Well, I said, smiling at my shoes, I wasn't going to let her negative energy take root. Seth, she said, Seth, look at me. I looked at her. Honey, she said, with all the gentleness she might have used on a 5-year-old who had skinned his knee, this is a meat-eating country, and it's always going to be a meat-eating country. You know, it wasn't exactly the vote of confidence I was looking for from that, but it was Aunt Rosie, you know, and she had her mind. But I went back to Oregon, and I started making tempeh. I found an old refrigerator under a bridge in Portland, and I cleaned it out, and I started fermenting tempeh, and I could make 100 pounds a night by myself. I'd go in there at 4 o'clock, and I'd start dehulling the beans and cooking them and putting them in bags to ferment, and I'd come back the next day and harvest them. So I could make like 300 pounds a week. So on April Fool's Day, 1981, I got this call, and it was from the Applegate Natural Food Distributors, and they were like, we want to buy 1,000 pounds a week of your tempeh. And I was like, okay, we can do that. And so I started a journey, about a 9-month journey, and I was looking all up and down for new places, bigger places. I needed to expand. And I trekked out someplace like there was this speedometer shop above, and there was a basement below. They said you could be in this basement for the $400 a month that I thought I could spend. And I was like, okay, I'll look at it. And it was like windowless, and it had just like one of those lifts like you see in the movies that come up out of this basement. And worst thing was, every time they calibrated speedometers, dead spider parts would fall down from the ceiling, and I was like, I don't want to be here. And I had read about Indonesia, the home of tempeh, that the best tempeh came from the country, and where the water and the air is clean, and that's who I am anyway. I don't want to live in a city, so I went up to this town at the base of Mount Adams, 90 minutes or so from Portland, and I started looking around this beautiful valley for an old dairy barn or food processing place. And my friends had moved in there, and I was like, this is so great, I'm going to do it. But I couldn't find anything. And I had looked and looked, and I'd been in Portland, I had been up there, and nothing was happening for me. So, you know, every business, when you're starting out especially, you come to a point where you can either go one way and fail, and one way and go forward. So I was really at that point. My money had run out, and then I came here. Sometime in early October, I drove down the White Salmon Valley from Trout Lake after what I suppose would be the last of my searches for space in Klickitat County. It just wasn't going to work out. I thought I wasn't going to find the right space, and Turtle Island probably wasn't going to survive as a business for too much longer. I was feeling pretty low. On my drive down the beautiful White Salmon River, I pulled off in the little town of Hewsome to admire the falls, where the river cuts through a big formation of basalt. These falls are famous now in the kayaking and rafting world, but back then they were just beautiful to look at. I walked out onto the highway bridge and leaned over the railing and stared at them. The warm October sun gave the town a pleasant piney smell as it worked its way down through the ponderosa pines on either side of the river. Hewsome was even smaller than Trout Lake. It consisted of a cafe, a church, a fire station, a post office, and 17 houses. The biggest building in town was an abandoned elementary school just below where I'd parked. As I walked back to my sad little Datsun, I saw that what sort of looked like an old for sale sign taped to the front door. I fired up the Datsun and drove over for a closer look. It was a for sale sign, and judging from the general decay of the duct tape that held it in place, it had been there for a long time. I wandered around the building to peek in the windows. There were 4 empty classrooms on one wing of an L-shaped building, and on the other wing, there was a gym, an office full of old boxes, and after I'd rubbed off enough grime to peer inside, the tempeh shop of my dreams. Exactly what I was looking for. Tempeh Nirvana. I stared in wonder at a small industrial kitchen that was exactly the right size for an expanded Turtle Island. It came with 2 stainless steel sinks that would easily hold our baking trays of soybeans. The concrete floors were covered with clean red tile and not 1 but 2 floor drains. A stainless steel hood shined over an industrial oven and grill. The most incredible thing, though, was off to the side. There was not 1 but 2 storage rooms that I could make into an incubator that would handle 300 pounds of tempeh at a time. It was perfect. It was just like an elementary school architects of 1953 had time traveled to the future and asked me if the kitchen looked okay. There was a phone number to call on the for sale sign, but it was Sunday, so nobody would have picked up on the other end. It was also 1981, so I didn't have a cell phone and couldn't have called anyway except from a payphone in White Salmon or Hood River. Instead of calling my non-existent cell phone or checking out a non-existent Zillow listing, I did an analog information search by walking across the highway to Don and Betty's Cafe. An old-timer sat at the front counter reading a month-old newspaper. I asked about the school, and without looking up from the paper, he told me that the school had been empty for the last 7 years after logging collapsed in Klickitat County, and the school district in White Salmon had to shut it down for lack of students. Why isn't anyone using it? I asked. Well, he said, scratching his neck, some tried. And? Tits up, he said. He looked up from the paper and gave me a look that was clearly measuring me to find out how long it would take for me to go tits up too. His frown suggested months more than years. Anyways, I went to the school board and I cooked them up some tempeh at a meeting, and it was a pretty intense meeting. Bob was there. And I had a new pair of jeans that I was wearing, and it was like this is 1981. People in Portland, in the progressive city of Portland, nobody knew what tempeh was back then, and here was these conservative orchardists and a pharmacist and his wife, and I was explaining tempeh to them, and they were sort of warming up a little bit to the idea of renting it because I didn't have that kind of money to buy a school, and it was like tense, and they said, how much money could you afford to pay if we wanted to rent it to you? And I said, this is negotiations, right? And I said, how about $150 a month? And it just got quiet. And I thought, this is really not going to work. And then there was like heavily constructed hindquarters scratching on their chairs and metal chairs, and it was like, then suddenly this one woman who had kind of liked the tempeh, she goes, I say we take it. What do we have to lose? I was like, and they all sort of like, well, okay, let's do it. So they rented me the building for $150 a month, and I went in there and started making tempeh. And You know, the city of Hewsum being a small town, having this weird little tempeh business come in was really strange, but everybody was really friendly. You know, it wasn't such a political atmosphere now where we have everybody on both sides, you know, and people were just all trying to survive in this funky little town. And one of the people that I came across was Luther Olson, who sold water to the town. And he said, he had a little well up there, and I said, Luther, how much is water going to cost me? And he said, $10 a month. And I said, Luther, I'm going to be using a lot of water, $10 a month. And he wouldn't budge. And he was just like, so I had this great opportunity in this school, and it was still, you know, nip and tuck, and I wasn't making any money, but I was surviving. And then I found in the fall of 1982, I had another stroke of good luck. I had another moment of good fortune. I'd walked over to the post office to send out some mail. Bonnie, the Hewsum postmaster, and entire post office staff asked me if I might be interested in living in the one-bedroom apartment that she and her husband Dick had created on the second floor of their house. Definitely, I said. Their house was just across the bridge leading into town, a quick 3-minute walk from the tempeh shop. I assumed it had hot water available for its shower too, which I was missing quite a lot by then. I also hoped that their apartment smelled better than the mouse urine and mold that gave my travel trailer its distinctive aroma. Great, said Bonnie. The only problem, though, is that I'm a man of limited financial means, I said. That's not a problem. I'm not sure I could afford the rent. Bonnie smiled. Seth, we can't find anyone who can afford anything right now. The economy's so bad. We just thought it'd be good to have someone living up there to keep it up until things got better. We'll let you stay there rent-free. To this day, I don't know what was behind her and Dick's unexpected generosity. Maybe she was grateful for the way we let the community use the school without charging rent. Maybe she felt a mother's concern for this wayward child. Whatever the reason, Bonnie's offer was beautiful and timely for this young bootstrapper. I came to the end of my first year in Hewsum with a 13,000 square foot school with a commercial kitchen for $150 per month and had a clean, roomy, heated apartment for $0 a month. There's the idea out there that business is a mean, dog-eat-dog world. There may be some truth for that idea, but for the generosity I'd found in Hewsum was deeply encouraging. It told me that business can also be a generous, people-helping people world. Standing there in the post office, smiling at Bonnie like a happy idiot, I had a strong sense that the universe was letting me know that I was in the right place, doing the work I was meant to do, and doing it in the right way. Wow. And, thank you. You know, it was a magical time, and I couldn't have survived without both of those things happening. You know, it's like, because I couldn't rent the house. You know, I was living on $300 a month for the first 10 years of business, and I ended up, that's where the tree house came in. Like, I rented 4 trees for $25 a month, and then spent money to build a 3-story tree house that had, you know, a wood stove and a sleeping loft and a tree house, pea house that I built on the deck. And you know, it was a warm home for, you want to keep your overhead low when you're going, or I guess high in this case. But I stayed in that tree house for 7 years until a fateful day in 1990. I met my wife, Sue, who I'm still married to, and she was a great cook and fine and everything, and we got married. And now people go to Sue, they go, hey, did he make you sign a prenup? And she scoffs at him, the little sneer in her lip, and she goes, prenup? This guy lived in a tree. I had a house. I had a job. I had insurance. I'm the one that needed the prenup. And that was true. But, you know, it was like 10 years in, I was really feeling like it's time to move. I'm not really making any money. I've made $300 a month for 10 years, and now I've got, you know, a family, and we were soon to have a baby boy, and so I started looking for a way out. I thought, well, I'm a failure at business, you know, this isn't working out. And I started writing a treehouse book because I'd had all these people write me letters about the treehouse, and I was like, well, maybe that'd be more profitable or something than this stupid little tempeh job. And maybe Aunt Rosie was right, you know. But the treehouse book didn't work out, and I moved the business over to Hood River, a bigger town and a bigger space, and we started making more and more tempeh. And then in 1995, the idea came, you know, I have nothing really to eat at Thanksgiving, so maybe I'd always thought there should be a product. And a friend of mine, one of my customers, was making these stuffed tofu roasts that you can still find the recipe for on the internet, and it's spelled Tofurkey as opposed to, which we spell Tofurky without the E. And it was like you'd mash up tofu and you'd line a colander with cheesecloth. Has anybody made that thing? You've made it, yeah. Every year. And you put the tofu in the colander with the cheesecloth, and you put your fist in there and you make a hole for the stuffing, and then you put the stuffing in and you flip it over onto a baking tray and you bake it. And that was the first Tofurkeys, was that exact recipe. And the thing about it was they were great fresh, but we were selling them frozen because we were shipping them all up and down the West Coast, and we shipped 880 that year, and people loved it. You know, they were like, oh man, this is like, I've been waiting 20 years for this. I'll drive, you know, 2 hours to get one. And it was really good. But they had also said, you know, that when you freeze tofu, it kind of gets spongy. I don't know if you've ever froze tofu, but it's like the texture wasn't great. So the next year we changed to a more baked tofu, and then the following year we developed the recipe that is really close to the recipe that we have now, which is a roast and the stuffing in the middle. So that was really the moment that supercharged my life and changed my life from all these years of making mistakes and failures to getting the Tofurky out there. And after a year or two, we started making the deli slices, which we had here today, and they became like a hit, and then the sausages became a hit, and everything was, we were still making tempeh, and I felt like I'm kind of through with my bootstrapping, you know, life of making all these mistakes and everything. But the moment where it all turned around was, it was in 2001, and I was sitting at my desk at 7 o'clock at night, and I was about ready to pull the plug, and the phone rang. And I said, do I want to pick up the phone? And I was like, what the heck? And I picked up the phone. And on the other end of the phone, I heard, Seth! Seth! And I was like, Aunt Rosie? Is that you? And she said, Seth, you know, you were on Jeopardy. You were a $400 question. And she goes, I knew it was going to be a good success. But, you know, it was so nice of her to call, and she had changed, and she was living as assisted living, you know, and her kids were all grown, and it was just a warm moment that really, you know, meant a lot to me, and seeing how people change, you know, and they change their opinion, and it's really possible for everyone to change. So, you know, after that, we all, you know, the book, it was more fun to write about the Hewsome and failure story and how you made it there than it was like, oh yeah, then we did this and it was successful and did good. But the book has all that story in it, and I've been really grateful to help pioneer the plant-based foods movement. So But that's the real insight onto Tofurky. So I want to give you, just finish with a quick little sort of state of the vegan union from my point of view. I'm no longer employed by the business. We sold because of the business model that we were doing, where we were trying to grow through just profits and bank loans. You know, when you had these big guys, Beyond and Possible and all these other, that kind of changed the landscape, and they were just buying up shelf space, you know, and we didn't have the wherewithal to do it. So we sold to our tofu maker. That was this vegan company, Japanese company called Pacific Nutritional Foods, but it's allowed me now to work with people like Sarar was mentioning about the Ukraine Vegan Kitchen, and I have something going in Uganda where we're feeding 250 at-risk school kids a day with these free vegan meals, and it's I feel like I would just want to keep the dream and the brand of Tofurky alive, and you know, because it was always sort of a mission-based business for us, and so that's where I've seen. So I go around, and you know, I give talks and I go to different places, but this is my state of the vegan union sort of thing, and some of the things I'm really excited for, and I got a lot of things to get through here. So right now, there's about 17 million vegetarians in the United States now. About 3% are vegan and about 2% are vegetarian. That's 17 million. And in 1948, there was a Gallup poll that said there were 3.5 million vegetarians, because they didn't break it down to vegetarian vegans then, so it was vegetarians and vegans. Over the past 76 years, the U.S. population from 1948 has grown 2.3 times, so a little over doubled. But the number of vegetarians has and vegans has gone about 5 times. So we are growing, the vegetarian vegan movement is growing twice as fast as America is growing, which is, you always, you know, when you're going in to sell Tofurky or something to a buyer, you always want to say, we're growing faster than the category, and we, vegans and vegetarians, are growing faster than the population of the United States. So that's a really positive sign. In 2010, there were 1,800 vegan restaurants in the world, according to Happy Cow, and today there's over 11,000. So we've seen an amazing growth in the vegan restaurants. The top 3 cities in the world for vegan restaurants is, as you might expect, New York City and London are the top 2. And I will give a Tofurky hat to the person that can tell me what's the number 3 city, and this is like vegan trivia. So that's amazing. You know what? Another honorable mention here is Mexico City, where I was last fall. They have 126 vegan restaurants, Mexico City, plus they have the largest chain of vegan retail grocery stores in the world. There's 24 Mr. Tofu stores in Mexico, all over Mexico, like you go, which is amazing, you know. And it's amazing because people think of Berlin as like this hot spot, but they tried in Germany to do this vegan retail store, Vegans, and they had 11 all over Germany, and then now they have 2. They couldn't do it. But this guy in Mexico has got 24 stores and growing, and he's thinking of coming to the United States. So that's pretty cool. Have you all heard of Veganuary? Veganuary is a campaign that started in the UK, which asks people to pledge to try to eat vegan for 30 days in January 31. And it's an amazing thing. There was 125 million people who tried vegan all over the world, and it's not just, you know, Western countries too. It's like India has quite a few. Like India, correct me if I'm wrong, is mostly vegetarian as opposed to vegan. Like New Delhi, which is this huge city, has 3 vegan restaurants, and but it's really it's the 3rd biggest pledge country for veganuary. So it's really taking hold there and all over the world. In fact, in 2023, there were pledges for veganuary in all but 3 countries of the world, and those are North Korea, Swaziland, and what European country is number 3 that had no people sign up for veganuary in 2023? And I'm going to give a t-shirt, a Tofurky t-shirt. Oh, there it is. What'd you say?
Vatican City?
Who said Vatican City? There you go. Can you believe that? The Pope hasn't done it yet. Yeah. But good job there. Yeah, you know, it's kind of disappointing that a spiritual place like that wouldn't see that. You know, there was the same people. Oh, does he? Yeah. Well, that's it. You know, it is, commercially, it's a very tough time right now in the vegan center. You know, like we've had this growth curve since the 70s, really, and every year it's grown a little more, and now it's plateauing and flattening off a little bit. Like, we're in the age of misinformation. You know, there's like a troll farm. There's troll farms in Denver that just hire people to do nothing but, you know, seed misinformation about vegan foods on the internet. They go on the internet. So if you get a post online and then some wacko is saying something, it could be coming from the troll farm. But, you know, all movements have, like, all growth is like this. It's not usually like that, and they have up and down periods. And one up and down period for meat was in 1902 to 1920. Sales of meat dipped down 24% over that time period, from 220 pounds per capita in 1902 to 170 pounds per capita in 1920. And what was happening in that? Well, it was World War I, but even started before that, which was The Jungle, was written by Upton Sinclair, and it highlighted all of these just terrible things they were doing. They were shoveling sawdust into the sausage and doing all this stuff, and it caused the FDA to put the USDA inspectors into all meat plants because of that novel. So that's the power of a novel. But there was also, as many other things, as Vance can attest to, which is like Kellogg's was, John Harvey Kellogg invented the first meat alternatives in 1890s, and there was a big Columbia Exposition, world kind of fair in Chicago that had a big vegetarian thing, and Chicago became the epicenter for vegetarianism, and the stockyards, you know, right there and everything. But they dropped down. Now, America eats about like 250 pounds per capita of meat every year, which is the highest in the world. And I didn't eat any, which means somebody out there ate 500 pounds. But I don't know who that would be. Not in this crowd. Yes?
Besides the human beings, also add in America the dogs and cats.
Yes.
There's statistics on that, and they're like fifth in the world as far as consumption, meat consumption.
Right.
You know, behind countries like Brazil and Russia, and number 5.
Right.
So that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just pointing to the Pope because he named himself after St. Francis, who's a friend of the animals.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. The Pope was actually offered $1 million to his favorite charity by one of the big funders in the vegan movement. It was like 3 or 4 years ago, And he did not do it. Like, all he had to do was to go vegan for the month of January for $1 million to a charity of his choice. Wouldn't do it. So that's, yeah. Okay, so, yeah.
When you say 250, is that presuming just red meat, not?
No, that's all meat.
All meat.
Chicken,
Okay.
everything. So there's some exciting things happening, though, politically now. You probably heard that New York City hospitals that are owned by New York City, thanks to Mayor Iveson and Rachel, his compartment, they are now, if you go to a hospital, the default meal is a vegan meal for you, which is amazing. Which is like a step forward. The next thing we want to see is Happy Cow go out of business, because there's so many vegan restaurants that they don't need it anymore, but there is a What's the Beef app, and people have to drive all the way across town to find some restaurant that still serves meat. So that's what we're coming to, I think. And they'd have the day when meat eaters have to go online. You know, you're taking a plane ride and you want to have a vegan meal, and how easy that is to remember and do. It'll be like meat. It'll be on the other foot, and there'll be meat eaters having to do that for a while, and then they just won't have any. Also, New York is suing JBS, the world's largest meat company, in Brazil. And they're suing them because of greenwashing. You know, they said we're going to be net zero by 2030, and they said there's just no way that that is going to happen, and so we are suing you for greenwashing and being inaccurate there. Another cool thing is the World Bank. It just came out and said, it's a groundbreaking new report, and they said, hey, instead of feeding money towards the animal industry for subsidies, you should be sending it to the vegetarian and vegan industry and plant-based industry as subsidies, because everything really is going to take off when there's this image for vegan and vegetarian food that it's so expensive, it's more expensive than meat. But the true cost of meat is being subsidized by our government to the point where it's not a level playing field. Nobody is calling Tofurky up and saying, we'd like to give you millions of dollars here to do this campaign, a marketing campaign. At least not yet. When I left on Friday, maybe they called over the weekend.
I was going to say, add to that with the government is the food pyramid. And when we look at that in the United States, right, is to get that changed.
Right.
Replace it with a vegan plate.
Yeah.
Like if we could do something like that,
Yeah.
right? That's trying to get that going.
Yeah. Well, the vegan food pyramid, is all these vegetables and fruits with a little sriracha and nutritional yeast sprinkled over the top, I think, right? Don't you love nutritional yeast? Mm-hmm. I don't know what's the matter, though. I mean, I'm so incredibly impressed by New York. Like, they have these T-shirts. Have you been to New York and they see that I have nutritional yeast T-shirts everywhere for sale? But the ones I bought, they leave out the nutritional yeast. They just say I heart NY. I heart. They abbreviate it, but they still mean it. Yeah.
The dairy industry is also kind of plummeting. When I was growing up, I'm from New York, but I live here now. We used to get milk from Elmhurst Dairy. I think they now only sell plant milk.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
maybe so.
The dairy industry is going down.
Right. And we can't leave New York before we highlight Amy Hanlon of the Coalition for Healthy School Lunches and the work that she's done. This woman, she's been at it for how many years? 20 years. She's been going to schools and keeping at it, and she's got some really great success stories. She has 1,800 schools now doing a vegan meal every week, which is really impressive. So thank you, Amy. So here's where we are. We got 36% of all mammals on Earth are humans. 60% of animals are farm animals. and that leaves 4% of mammals are now living in the wild. 70% of birds are farm animals, and we have 7 billion of us now on the planet, 10 billion projected by 2050, and over half of the world's habitable land is already farmed for food.
That is so sad.
And what are we going to do? The problem which we basically face is how are we going to grow 56% more food to feed 10 billion people without using more land and lowering emissions by 67%? Sounds like a tall order, doesn't it? Let me read that again. It's so important right now, and that we all keep it. So that's number one. Number two, this is like a controversial thing, and it's really not for us, which we are happy with our plant-based diets, but there's the cell-based meats. We have Blue Seafood in Germany doing a fish that should be on the market soon, a cell-based that is not taking any fish. We have two companies in the U.S. that are approved now for making chicken, and this is cell-based. And like I said, it's probably not for us here, but it is.
I just have one quick question.
Yes.
They just take a chicken, remove some cells,
Yes.
and then supposedly build this line.
Right.
What do they do with the origin?
That's a great question, and probably varies in terms of an answer. But it's 6 days for them to grow chicken in a lab, whereas it's like 6 weeks for a chicken.
People
for
are
science.
so they're too selfish.
People go, I mean, ooh, are people going to want lab-based meat? And I'm like, they're already sold on the most despotic way of making protein ever and the most inefficient, so here is a bit of mine. Here's another trend, you know, Beyond and Impossible have had the burgers. Has anybody had the whole cuts of vegan meats, like Juicy Marbles? Are there any Juicy Marble fans here? There's that's a push now. There's a lot of innovation coming in steaks and whole cuts of meat, pork and chicken. You got to check out the Juicy Marble site. And then also now 3D printed food is coming. There's 3D printed steaks, there's 3D printed pork, and there's 3D printed salmon. And they're coming out of Israel, and I've had all three, and they're amazing. The texture, especially on the salmon, is good. They don't have the flavor quite nailed yet, but they have the texture.
What do they make them from?
They make it from soy protein concentrate, sunflower oil, natural flavors, beet juice concentrate, vitamin B12. They have these jets that spit out the fat, the blood, and the texture of the stuff, and they make these incredible products. The steak was unbelievable. I had it in a restaurant in London. It had the texture and taste of meat. It was.
What's the blood cream?
The blood thing is beet juice, red beet juice. So they'll look for your 3D printed. You can get this.
Aesthetically, how does it look?
It looks great. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
But that's what I feel. That's what we've been conditioned to do since we were born, and that's what we need to get away from.
Yeah, but
The idea,
that might be for you.
the
But there's a
idea-
lot of people out there.
The
that-
idea of eating others,
Yeah.
other beings,
Right.
is like we're all Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right. You can have 3D printed salmon in New York. It's several restaurants, Grassroots Kitchen, Coletta Vegan Kitchen, and several others. So that's pretty amazing. One of my last things that I'm really excited about is that there is a movement now that is going to be more efficient than plant-based, and that is these tasty little microbes, like, and this is all about, these are tiny little organisms. Like if you put 100 of these microbes together, they wouldn't equal the size of a grain of sand. And like there's 3 different companies, one of which we're going to sample here in a minute, which is Find. And Find went out to, it's based on the NASA in the 1970s. They were looking for what could grow on alien planets. And one of the things that they found was this mushroom microbe called Fusarium strain flavopolis. And it came from Yellowstone Park, and they took it back to the lab, and they're growing these big sheets of protein on it. Like one 16 by 24 inch sheet pan can have as much protein as there is in 20 chickens. And they're making cream cheese and yogurt, which we're going to have here in a minute. And they also make breakfast sausage, and they're all out of this microbe. And they never have to go back to Yellowstone to get more cells. It's all, you know, it's kind of a nice job if you can get it, right? You go out to a hot spring and hang out and collect samples of microbes. But the thing about these is they can grow in space too, and as we get out there. The other one that's cool is air protein. There's people making protein from air. And this is like during the 1970s, the space program, NASA, explored a way to feed astronauts that are traveling deep into space. Like, well, how are you going to feed people on a trip to Mars or way out and beyond Mars? And one of the things that they found was that they could create protein out of the CO2 that the astronauts were breathing. And the whole process was shelved because at that point spaceships weren't going out. There was no need for it. They weren't going out that far. But now that our planet looks more and more like a spaceship with limited resources needing to be an efficient way of feeding people, they have this air protein product that is going to be in stores in 3 to 5 years. And the thing about it is, like, well, as the next one will say, like, the advantages of it is soy and grains will grow like 1 crop a year, right? Beef is like 2 crops, or 2 years for a crop. Produce 1 or 2 crops a year, but air protein can create food every 96 hours. So it's like, and the thing about it is you can do this anywhere. You don't have to have fertile land. Like we were saying, you know, we don't want to make new land. We just want to make protein on a way that doesn't take more forests out of the system. So those guys are doing it. It's low in fat, it's highly digestible, and carbon neutral. Then there's this company called Solar Foods in Finland that's doing the same thing. And they're making this protein they found in a forest right near their manufacturing plant in Finland. And it's 70% protein with all 9 essential amino acids, actually all 20, and the 9 essential amino acids. And it's 100 times less water than plant-based meats, and up to 600 times less than water than beef. 20 times more efficient than plant production, and 200 times more efficient. They could do it, you know, and they can make ice cream out of it, which means that our astronauts, when they do go out there, they won't have to suffer on that terrible freeze-dried ice cream. Have you ever had astronaut ice cream? It's terrible. Anyways, it's getting better. Miyoko's, the brand, they have those cheese wheels. They're now taking those wheels and they're putting them in tubs, and they're going to reduce the price from $10.99 to $6.99. So that should be coming out soon. Rebel Cheese is another brand that's up and coming. It got a deal on Shark Tank, and they have some great bries. Artisanal cheeses now. It's, you know, not just cheddar and mozzarella. So we're having that. It's really expanding. So plant-based cheese is having a moment, but the big thing is plant-based milks, which are now 15% of all milk sold in America is plant-based, which is amazing. And 46% of U.S. households bought plant-based milks in 2023, and 76% were repeat buyers, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. So that's the real hero product of plant-based foods, is plant-based milks. But basically, the big hope is all of us vegans, you know, that are still fighting the good fight and out there every year, and, you know, we are this season's peoples, and it's up to us to make this all happen. And I love being here, and I love all of you guys that have been doing this such wonderful things in